cramped. We may be carrying heavy bags, all sorts of things. Eye strain, people working on sometimes small laptops. Stress, and by which I mean negative stress, because of course we can have positive and negative stress, so too much stress. Burnout, anxiety. You see the thoughts that have come into my mind. So, leave that to one side for a moment. What's yoga? Anyone got any views here? Whether it's the first one or the second one? So for me, I'd say it's probably both. Yoga comes from the word yog, to connect, to bring together. So we're starting to go into coming home. One of the things we're trying to connect and bring together is ourselves, the different parts of us. So that's pretty obvious in the picture of the man with the oxen. But it's also something that's almost undoubtedly going on for the woman who's doing the complicated headstand. Because in order to do something like that, she has to be very aware of what's going on with the muscles in her body, all the way through her body, from her head to her fingers, all the way up to her toes. And she undoubtedly has to be very conscious of what's going on in her breath. And she has to keep her focus clear to stay steady in this pose. So in other words, she has to be contained. For some reason, my screen is not going down. What is going on? Okay. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on this slide, but I just thought I would put it up there because so often yoga is depicted as being primarily about the headstand. It's depicted about being about physical practices, often performed by very flexible women. And actually, that's just one small part of yoga. So in my school, we say that there are 6 paths. Other schools may differentiate it in slightly different ways, but there are 6 paths. And the main ones that I'm really going to be focusing on today are Raja, Hatha, and Karma. And I hope that as I do that, some of why this is relevant to humanitarians will be obvious. So what is karma yoga? Karma yoga is selfless service. It's doing things for other people without thinking predominantly about ourselves, our own gain. So in my yoga, in my approach to yoga, my yoga school, we will say that there's no need to ever do an asana in your life. There's no need to ever do one of these yoga postures in your life. You may be a very great a yogi and be a karma yogi. And many of us who are in a humanitarian field may have that inclination. Yeah, we're about service to others. And this is really at the core of the school that I am from. Because if there's one thing that really defines it, or one little phrase that really defines it, it's the idea of easeful body, peaceful mind, useful life. So that if we do the practices, it's in order that we can better be of service. So Hatha yoga I won't really go into because many people will have heard it, but just to say that it's not just about the postures, it's also about how we breathe. It's also about how we use our energy and how we get our energy. Yeah, whether it's from the food we eat, the air we breathe, yeah, or how we breathe it. And Raja Yoga is the king of yogas, and this is what I would describe as a very practical philosophy of classical yoga. So if anyone has questions about the others, I'm happy to go into them, but I just think that for now, those are the key ones. So Raja Yoga. So those of you who are familiar with yoga may already know these words, and they're the very beginning words of what is one of the key texts of Raja Yoga. And I'll just leave you to look at them. So what's, I think, maybe interesting or useful for us in terms of some of the sort of issues that have been raised is that here you'll see the main focus is on regulation. How do we regulate ourselves? How do we restrain what are called the fluctuations of the mind? So if you think, what do we mean by fluctuations of the mind? Basically, we mean what's happening when we feel under stress. That the mind is going here, the mind is going there, yeah? Or maybe when we're feeling anxious, or when we feel under a lot of pressure and we're pulled in multiple directions. So this is about restraining. And it's when we restrain that we come home. Yeah, that the self abides in its true nature, that we come into ourselves. And when we don't, that we seem to take on, we take on what the situation is that's going on all around us. And many of us work in situations which can be extremely chaotic and stressful. And I've put the picture of the water here because sometimes we talk about this aspect of yoga as being like the mind as being like the surface of the water, and all the different things that are coming into us are like drops on the surface of a lake or waves on the surface of an ocean. And with those drops and with those waves, the water becomes cloudy and mixed up with whatever is there, seaweed, mud, plants, and we can't see through clearly to ourselves. And so the ability to see through clearly to ourselves and rest clearly within ourselves is really what yoga is all about. How do we do it? Two key aspects. We practice and we take non-attachment. What that means, practice means we just do what we do. Our job is to do our best. Non-attachment means we don't concern ourselves too much with the outcome. So we aim for the outcome, but we don't assume it's going to come. And so if you think about this in terms of the work we do, often, we have high aims, huge log frame that may say we're going to achieve lots and lots of different wonderful things. And the reality is it may be difficult to achieve them all. So if we think about it just in terms of how yoga would see that, it says our job is to do our best, but be mindful that we are not necessarily in complete control. So again, the main point here is that yoga is a big place. And what that means is there are many different approaches that we can take, many different aspects that we can use in yoga therapy. And so in yoga therapy, depending on what a person who comes to yoga therapy wants to work on, what their concerns are, what their desires for themselves are, and really what path, remember those different paths, what path is comfortable for them. We'll choose a range of different modalities from all of these, basically. So I expect that those of you who are familiar with yoga will have heard of some of these, but maybe those of you who are not familiar with yoga won't have heard any of them. So just maybe just explaining a little bit about what they are. So yama and niyama are some of the sort of ethical precepts that we have within yoga. And I like to talk about them as sort of being ethical ideals. And they're really a picture of who we are when we are in ourselves, when we have come home to ourselves. So this is not a kind of so much a sort of do's and don'ts list, but more something that might portray who we are when we're within home within ourselves. Asana, you will probably know, this is physical posture. And for us, asana is not so much about gymnastics, but it's about being strong, being stable, being comfortable in our bodies. So this is where the aspect of easeful body comes in, because if our neck hurts, if our eyes are sore, if our back hurts, if we feel unsteady on our legs, it's more difficult for us to work. If we feel shaky because of anxiety or stress, or we haven't slept well. Pranayama is about how we use our breath, how we use our energy. And pratyahara is about using our senses very judiciously. So the information that we get from touch, from smell, from hearing, from sight. And dharana and dhyana are a process into meditation. And through that process, yoga encourages us to come home. And what is home? So in yoga, and this is really, I suppose, one of the things that really got me hooked on yoga. And that is that it's profoundly positive. It's profoundly positive about humans. And I hope you'll see that as we go through a little bit more. But right in the center of our home is joy. So when we come home, the homecoming is into a place of joy, into a place of perfection, into a place where we absolutely are enough. Now, that doesn't mean that everything we do is enough. That does not mean that everything we think is perfect. But here yoga makes a distinction between the seer, the self, our own true self, and the things that we do and the things that we feel. So the things that we do, the things that we feel are temporary, they're passing. Today we feel sad. Maybe tomorrow we feel sad. Maybe the day after we feel sad. And maybe there comes a day and we don't feel sad. So we feel the feeling, whatever it is, but we don't become attached to it. We know that it's just another one of these waves in the mind that may come and that may go. And so that center is a place of strength. Yeah. Okay. So I hope I'm keeping you all with me. There will be time for questions. And I hope you do ask them. But I just thought I'd get a little practical. And so here I just chose to pull out a few little strands and hope that they are things that are useful and that maybe you hadn't heard about, even if you are familiar with yoga, and if you're not familiar with yoga, that you feel intrigued to learn more. So first of all, I pulled out two little concepts from the yamas, some of these ideals. And I'm going to call them the A and the B, the A and the B of yoga for humanitarians. So the first one is ahimsa, do no harm. Anyone else have heard that statement? Who's worked in a conflict? How about those of you who've worked in conflict affected settings? I wonder if there's any resonance, with conflict sensitivity. But what's important here is that doing of no harm includes to yourself. So it's not just about doing no harm to others, or another way to say it is acting with respect for all. Love, we don't mean romantic love, but rather a kind of respect for everyone. So what might that mean in a situation where you're under more pressure than you can cope with? Where you feel that you're at risk of burnout? And maybe that brings us nicely to the letter B, brahmacharya. Brahmacharya is about moderation, or better still, using our energy wisely. Yeah. Using the stimulation that we get from our senses, whether it's from our ears, people telling us what to do, our eyes, the computer, the news, the sounds and sights around us, using it wisely in a way that causes no pain, including to ourselves. The locks and keys are a concept which can be very helpful for many people in terms of some of those. One of the issues that came up was about difficulties in working with other people, where many people are stressed. And again, remembering that the key purpose here in this approach of Raja Yoga is about staying within ourselves, regulating so that we stay within ourselves, within our own strength, within our own center. So we we keep calmness. And so it's got 4 really simple little recommendations. And maybe if you just think about them, maybe that's one of the things we can talk about in the second half. So it just says, when encountering or dealing with happy people, use friendliness. When encountering or dealing with unhappy people, compassion. Where people are virtuous, delight. So the opposite of delight might be, for example, to feel jealous or envious. And where there's wickedness, disregard. Now, this often needs a lot of explanation for people, but my understanding of it is not that you necessarily, it's not about turning the other cheek, but it is about ensuring that you don't, that as an individual, you maintain your own calmness. So you don't become knocked off center by other people's anger, other people's hurtful statements, that you stay, or hurtful actions, that you stay within your center. All of this, of course, much easier to say than to do. But a very important part of these locks and keys is they don't just apply to our interactions with others, but to our interactions with ourselves. Because we've all got elements of ourselves that are happy. We've got elements of ourselves that are unhappy. We've got elements of ourselves that are virtuous and elements that are perhaps a little bit less virtuous. So pranayama, you know, if anybody has a question I didn't ask, but I should have done. I mean, has anybody attended a course about stress, how it affects you, about preparing for mission life? I'm assuming that people have. Let me just go off share screen for a second. Yeah. So I'm assuming that people have. No? Okay, all right. So let me ask another question then. Do people know about things like the fight-flight response? Is there anyone who feels that they don't know about it? Okay. All right, so I better explain a little bit then. So I was kind of assuming that you would know. So basically, to put it in very simple terms, and this will be a quick and dirty explanation, but we have 2 parts of our nervous system. So everyone knows we've got a nervous system, right? Okay. We've got 2 parts of our nervous system. One part of the nervous system is responsible for calming us down. Yeah, enables us to sleep, enables us to digest food. Yeah, helps us be creative, have good interactions with others. And another part of the nervous system is, and I'm explaining this in very simple terms, is what's called the fight and flight, or might even, when it gets really bad, be the freeze response. Okay, and this is the part of our body, or this is the part of our nervous system which is responsible for revving us up. Yeah, for revving us up, having us do things and go places. So there are many aspects of this, and I'm really not going into them in any detail. This is very, very simple. And there are different parts of the brain and different parts of our nervous system which are responsible for all of these. But in really simple terms, if we think about some of those points that people brought up about issues that we face, negative stress or too much stress, yeah, or concerns about anxiety or burnout, this is an activation of the fight and flight system. So this is when our fight and flight system is becoming activated. And the purpose of the fight and flight system, very simply, is to take us out of danger. So it's really good that we've got it. Yeah, we all need it. The difficulty is that sometimes when it gets turned on for too long, it doesn't like to turn off, or it finds it more difficult to turn off. So if any of you can think about maybe just a time when you felt really stressed or anxious, maybe it was difficult to go to sleep. Maybe your digestion wasn't feeling so great. Maybe you felt shaky or hypervigilant. Yeah, hypervigilant means noises are more startling. Yeah, so somebody drops a pen and you jump. Yeah, so this is that fight, flight, freeze system being activated. And everyone with me? Great. Okay, so all this stuff I can go into in more depth, but we don't really have the time. So let me just come up with the PowerPoint again. And okay, so okay. So for those of you who've been on a sort of stress management course, or who've been on pre-deployment training to a dangerous area, one of the things you might have been told is that the breath is really a very powerful, very, very powerful tool for regulating how we feel. And in yoga, we call it the gateway between the body and the feelings and emotions. So we can use, so in yoga, we can use the breath very deliberately. So we can use it very deliberately to calm us down. We can use it very deliberately to wake us up or energize us. We can use it very deliberately to sort of equalize or balance. And there are different practices that we can use. So obviously, working with people who are anxious or stressed, generally we want to go into equalization or calming. And generally, if we bring the breath level, that is a good start. So we'll try out some of that when we go into the practical session. So movement, yeah, asana, movement. Again, let me ask a question to you. When you're feeling tired, when you're feeling emotionally drained, maybe when you're feeling sad, what does the body tend to do? What does your body tend to do? Does it tend to sort of curl over? How about when you're feeling good and positive? Is there a tendency to be more open and outwards? More expansive in the body? So we all know intuitively and from our own, experience just as human beings that there is a relationship between what happens in our body and how we feel. So with those aches and pains, obviously we can use movement to relieve stress, relieve tension. But in yoga, asana is also about how do we direct our energy, yeah? And about allowing some space to breathe. Because if we're curled over, working at a computer, yeah, our lungs don't have much space to breathe. Yeah, so and anxiety and stress are often associated with shallow breathing. So we can also use the asana to help us with that breathing, so to augment it, and also to directly work on the nervous system. And, you know, in yoga, we talk about, there are two ways that you can sort of address the emotions. One is what we would call top down. Yeah, so that might be talking therapy, for example. And another is bottom up. So bottom up means that we use the body, the breath, to directly work on our emotions. And yoga does both. So when I explained to you about those two nervous systems that we've got, a very important part, the most important nervous system within our body responsible for calming us down and allowing us to be creative in our thinking and to rest is called the vagus nerve. And most of the messages that pass through this nerve come from the body to the brain. So we think often that all the messages, all the thinking is going on from the brain down to the body, but actually all this information is being taken in through our senses, through what we see, through what we touch, through what we smell, through what we hear. And it's all, and both from the outside world and also from our inside world, yeah, from our heartbeat, from our breathing, from our gurgling in our stomach, yeah, and the pain in our foot. All those messages are going up through the nervous system to the brain. So with yoga, whether we're working with pranayama, breath regulation, or whether we're working with asana, we can choose to send messages to the brain that everything's okay. And we do that through the way we use our breath and through the shapes that we put our body into. So we'll try out a few of them in the practical session, but there's some points in the body that really can allow us to activate that sympathetic, that parasympathetic nervous system, that rest and digest part of the nervous system. Similarly, there are other parts, yeah, there are other movements, other shapes that we can use to wake us up. And so I hope you'll see here that as we want to work in our feelings, it's not only that asana is helpful if we've got aches and pains, but we can also use it to address how we feel emotionally, how we deal with the stresses and strains upon us. And as for the last three, the pratyahara, dhyana, samadhi, this again is perhaps more of the top down, that we're coming into a calmness in our mind through focusing specifically on something which is positive or uplifting for us. So we're not, as a yoga therapist, if I was using this technique, I would not necessarily be prescriptive about the object of focus, but rather ask someone to choose from their own experience something which is beneficial for them. And here again, you'll see that continuum into that central self of ourselves. And within here, along the process, identifying what's really important. And I should say that, you know, we also use other top-down ways. So the concepts, for example, of ahimsa and brahmacharya. The concepts of the locks and keys. How do we talk to ourselves? And there are some other techniques as well. All right. Oh, what's going on with my computer? So, just to finish it off before we have a break. So, who are you? Who are you? If we're coming home to you, who are you? What do we think you is when we talk about yoga therapy? So this is a model that we use very often in when we're using yoga therapeutically for health or well-being. And this actually comes, I should have said before, much of what I've been telling you before comes from a book that I did flash up, but I'll hold it up here. Hope you can see it, which is the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. But the book or the writings that this comes from is very ancient, and this is from one of the Upanishads. So very, very old indeed. All these things, the dating is not necessarily so clear, but a long time ago. And this is who it says you are. So it says that you are a whole series of interlocked sheaths, like an onion, perhaps. But there's the body, the flesh, the blood, the oxygen, the nitrogen, everything in that's going through the veins. You're the breath and the energy. That's the force of life. Yeah, if we don't breathe, if we don't have that oxygen, then we're not alive. You're the feelings and emotions that you have. And a little bit deeper still, you're the intuition. So when we come into stillness, as we start to come into stillness and we come into ourselves, often we know what's right for us. Yeah, so you can almost think of this. People talk about having like a little angel on their shoulder or a little voice in their mind, or maybe a little voice in their stomach, in their guts. And within this, there's also an aspect of connection. Because much as yoga says that in the center of us is this bliss and this joy and this peace, it says that that is there in every living creature. And so what's true in you is true in me, is true in all. And so there's a connection here. And indeed, in my yoga school, we ask, what's the difference between wellness and illness? We and I. And we know that one of the things which is most beneficial for our own resilience is having social support. And then right at the very center, that little star, you'll see here. Here is that joy or that bliss, that samadhi once again. What we call Satchit Ananda, yeah, truth, knowledge, bliss. So this has been a very super fast whirl through some of the key concepts of yoga that I use when working as a yoga therapist. I've worked with people throughout the world all sorts of people, with men, with women, with groups, with individuals, with deeply religious and devout people, with people who are atheists. I've taught in fields, in factories, in Roma Mahala, in bunkers, and also in a police station, and also in yoga studios and on Zoom. And I think one of the great benefits about this is you don't need any special equipment. It doesn't have to cost anything. You've got it within yourself. A teacher, a good teacher, can be helpful in guiding you through the process. But a good teacher, I think, should also be enabling you to own this for yourself, so that when you need it, when you really need it, at the moments when there are too many conflicting demands, at those moments when you are feeling anxious, at those moments when the stress is too much, that you have the tools to come home to you, even if it's for 5 minutes. And in that space, to make better choices, to look after your own health, to make better choices, to care for yourself, to apply those locks and keys, and to act in accordance with what's really necessary for your well-being. So I am just going to show one more slide, and I'll send this out to you. And this is just contact details for me, if anyone would like to get in contact at any point. But I'm going to stop the share. Yeah. So I'm very aware I have been talking for a long time. And I'm very aware that people may have all sorts of questions. I hope one of the problems about sharing PowerPoint is that I can't see you all whilst I'm sharing the PowerPoint. So it's difficult for me to judge if everyone's with me. But I hope you followed along. And I hope that it was clear for those of you for whom this is all totally new. And I hope that there were maybe some new aspects for those of you who are old hands in yoga. What I suggest is, since I'm sure everybody needs a break, that we take a 5-minute break, and we can do some questions after. I would just ask you, since we'll do a little bit of movement and we'll try and do a little bit of that exercise that I showed you, the circle exercise, if you can get a piece of paper and a pencil or pens, whatever you'd like. It's lovely to have Victoria here with us, who's actually, maybe I should just mention that more when we go into the practical session, but just to say that I know that for some of you, it will be something you've done before. And try and have a little bit of space around you. So if you actually have enough space to kind of a body size space on the ground, that would be great. If you don't, if you're sitting behind a desk, then try and push the desk away from you a little bit. So at least you've got a bit of space to move forward and backward. I suggest we close off now, we take a break, and that I see you in 5 minutes. How does that sound? Good? Okay, looking forward to seeing you in 5 minutes. Thank you very much. Bye.